And by no means am I an initial D nerd, so I don't even think I finished the series, but the dude who had, the lonely dude who had the Sylvia, you know, the two-tone, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, like that's a sick-ass car. I didn't know much about cars, so I didn't even know that we couldn't get those in the States. But I saw it in For the Four, so I'd always use it for drifting. And I used to look it up on Craigslist way before you could even get like a Sylvia. And I didn't know that, I didn't know they were illegal. And I would always look them up and be like, oh man, like none for sale today. And I was also like I was probably like 16 and I had no job and no money. So there was no way I was ever gonna buy one. But every now and then like one would pop up and it'd be like in Canada or something. So that was like my first introduction, I think, to like an S chassis, and it happened to be a Sylvia. And then, you know, some years go by and I get my hatch, which didn't work out too well because it was like a pretty battered, it wasn't like a battered car, but mechanically it wasn't like good, and I didn't know how to work on cars. Like it needed a transmission as soon as I bought it, and the transmission blew as soon as I sold it. That I always had that heavy imprint of like, oh, I'm gonna have one day a Sylvia, and I wanted it to be two-tone, which I got pretty close with a two-tone coupe, single cam coupe that I.
Hello. Hope you guys can hear me. Actually, you know what, I might it should be okay. So I'm gonna let some people flood in slowly, all like 3 or 4 of y'all. In the meantime, making sure all my stuff is ready to go. So, you know, take this time to grab a water, grab a coffee, grab an energy drink, whatever you want to do, and hang out with me. We're gonna be editing some Driftcon stuff today, so I am going to essentially just be culling through the photos and more or less kind of just doing what I would normally do when I edit. I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to that view now. I did want to show this real quick. I'm gonna be like officially talking about this tomorrow on Instagram, but Cars and Cameras #2 is happening on June 21st. It should be pretty fun. It's going to be similar to the last one if you were there, but a little bit more structured. And the guide photographers are going to be helping more people out learn like specifics and stuff. So this is just the quick edit of this, so you can kind of see the background of what was going on there. But this will debut tomorrow, and we'll start talking about it and kind of advertising it somewhat heavily starting soon. But let's get away from that and move on to Driftcon stuff. So I'm going to turn the music down a little bit for me. I think it should still be the same for you guys. You can let me know. I just don't need it quite as loud. All right, so this is Driftcon. This is Driftcon Season Opener 2025. These are just all the photos I took. So I'm going to kind of go through really slowly, well, not really slowly, but kind of go through how I would be editing these and how I would call through them, but in a slightly quicker version, because I think you guys want to just watch me through 5,024 photos, which is like a very small amount for an event like this, at least for me. Normally I'd be taking between 7,000 and 10,000 photos for an event like this, and then culling down all the way to like somewhere between 200 and 100. For this event, instead of that, we switched a little bit, and I'm going to just be editing a much smaller amount. So I'm already culled down to 37. From there, I have a few that aren't being used for like drift stuff. So like you can probably see some photos of birds here. This is like an osprey that was just hanging around. I'm not going to be sending this in for Driftcon, so already that's, you know, less there. So really what we're looking at is, I'll actually tag these a different color, so I'm not even looking at those anymore. But really what we'll be looking at is 33 images. About 30 images. 3 of those are the same. This one's kind of already edited. But yeah, I want to get this down to maybe 10 or so, 10 to 15, and that'll be it pretty much. And then we're just going to go through and edit those. But yeah, the kicker here is finding 10 interesting enough photos. So keep in mind that a lot of these photos are different, I guess. They're not kind of like the perfect shot. I'm kind of going for like more stylized, more interesting photos, something that'll bring people in, that'll look a little more, I don't know, more impactful images, which is one of the reasons I'm shooting down so little. So some of these images here of Tyler Mayer are slightly out of focus and slightly like motion blurred. This first one is like super radial blurred. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just hard to, point your camera behind you while you're in a drift car looking at another car like a couple feet away. This particular one was shot at 16 millimeters, if that helps you kind of gauge how close Tyler was. And this is during practice, so I don't think it was particularly expected for him to be this close. But I'm down to quite a few actually from his angle, and I'm not 100% sure which ones are good. I can actually already tell right now that I don't want to keep that one, as much as there's like sections that are in focus. The R is pretty solid. This like rear of door and rear quarter panel area is pretty good in focus, but I don't really care about that. So I'm gonna drop that one. And this one's just like a solidly in focus shot. Like that's just kind of a winner on any day. Somewhat similar to this one. And this one gives a little bit more of a story. You can see the car that I'm in. Normally I would kind of crop in, like, more like that. It's kind of interesting seeing the car that I'm in, but I also have that from here, and that's much more, like, this is way closer, way crazier. Realistically, I just shouldn't have shot this at 1/30th. I should have been shooting at a faster speed. I had one chance to do this, one lap to do this, and I definitely should have thought ahead. I also, if you can tell, didn't properly polarize the windshield, so that's another fix we'll have to do just while I'm editing. But yeah, I think maybe this one got the clipping zone. I can sharpen this up and we have a little bit of the car. This one he's so far out to the side it's kind of jarring, so I'll lose that one. We'll keep that one because that's kind of a standard one. I'm gonna lose this one for now, but I might keep it for later. But for now, I think we'll lose it. This is the guy I was driving with. David Dodge, I believe is his name. It's interesting. I don't know if it's interesting enough. I think I'm gonna lose that one. This is the car show, the right-hand drive fest. This is the only shot I took of this. I was just messing with the 16 mil, trying to get every shot or every car in shot. It's fine. Again, this is not something I would necessarily keep on a normal day, but I might sneak this one in here just because I am shooting, for the event, and getting one shot of all the cars is probably a good idea. Also, I just noticed that there's just a bajillion stages right here. That's interesting. I didn't realize they actually split this up so specifically. Stages, JZXs, GTR, well, Skylines. Looks like we're missing a GTR for the green one. And then a random. Huh. Didn't even notice. I didn't look at the show. If it's not clear, I literally never went to it. That's the closest I got to it. This image was meant to be interesting, but I'm just not sure. I shot it at 1/5 of a second, so this is, super slow shutter speed. You can tell in the movement here. I mean, there's people that are in the middle of walking that are moving. The flag is blurry due to movement. Nick is rock solid. And the cars are blurred, but I think I really needed to shoot this more at like 1 second, and it would have been cooler if they brought up a lot more smoke here. I think that would have been a a better shot. I think this one is only so-so. And for some reason I didn't line myself with this, which to me is like so annoying, but whatever. I don't know if anybody else actually cares about that, but it hurts me. It hurts me inside. I'm going to take a quick look at the stream. Actually, real quick, just from my side, I realized that I don't know if I have chat up, so I'm just not sure if people can see, or if I can see what people are saying, if anybody's saying anything. So I want to make sure that I can see that. It's also a very large possibility that no one's saying anything, which is fine. No, I cut my audio off. Okay, I think there's just no chat. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'll start the audio back up in a second here. Okay, back to the stream. Anyways, yeah, I think I'm probably gonna lose this one. It's fine, but it's not amazing. I like this one just because, like, you really get a view of the motion. You really get an idea of how much, you know, tires they're burning, how much movement there is. Surprisingly shot at 1/60th. I think I would crop this one in more like this. Maybe a little more just so you can see the driver a little more. I don't know. We'll mess with that one in a little bit. I think I'll keep this one. Although this is a very similar shot. And it does have more contrast and more color. That's tough. It's tough. Similar as well. Lose a bit of the wheel and not a lot of focus there. I think I'll lose that one. I guess that one was technically more like correct. Oh, Derek, hello. I see the messages now. Also, 2 retracted messages. I missed them. This one's interesting. The car's not perfectly in focus, but the driver is really well in focus. I think zooming way in on this one might be kind of interesting, so I'm going to keep that. Also, this Corvette was just super cool. It's hard to tell from that angle, but very cool Corvette. This is just a rare angle to hit. I don't know why, but in the drifting world, it's hard to hit this one, mostly because you see a lot of tire smoke. So normally you won't be able to get behind the cars, specifically in this angle, because the smoke will just be right in front of the camera. I always kind of like keeping those ones. This one, it's also just potentially interesting because of all the smoke and the angle, but I'm not in love with it, so I'm going to lose that one. I think anything that I can like immediately say I'm not in love with it, or I don't immediately have a reason to keep it, I just drop it. I think that's generally probably the way to go. I feel like there's no good reason to keep anything that you're like immediately not super hyped on. I have a lot from this angle. I don't love this one just because the cars aren't perfect. Like they're not stacked and they're not facing the same direction, this one. So I'm going to drop that one and keep that one probably. And then somewhat similar with this one. This one's tough, right? So theoretically this photo is not as good as this photo, right? But this photo, like it has Dario Reddick, which, you know, well known. But this photo has 2 like arguably more well-known drivers, John Daniel and Tyler Mayer. And so this photo would potentially be more meaningful to more people, which sounds shitty to be frank, but I just think that's kind of the world, you know, like you want to stand out, you want your photos to stand out, and you want to push an event for the event coordinator so the event coordinator can get more, you know, money in people and more viewers. They're gonna like it more when it's people they recognize, and so you kind of have to play to those strengths as well, and play to the idea that you are, it's not just a photo, like it's also a psychological game when it comes to advertising and marketing and stuff. So this photo is probably technically better. This one might bring more people in. Hard to say. I do have another one with them more appropriately stacked, but we get some motion blur here on Tyler, and It's hard to say. I think I'm probably gonna keep that one. I think I'll drop this one, and then it'll be between these two later. This one's interesting too. Again, difficult angle to get, but who knows? This one I think I'm gonna drop. Originally, I kind of thought it was interesting getting such a close-up of the driver, like wowing, but this is another one of those that would have to be an interesting crop, like almost like this or something, and I don't know, I just don't think it quite works, so I'm gonna lose that one. This is basically a repeat of that. I think this looks a little nicer. It's got extra smoke. This one, weirdly enough, even though I think Tyler's actually a little closer to John here, it doesn't look as impactful. I think there's a lot to be said about the cars stacked and like have their angles like perfectly even like this, as opposed to having, I don't know if you can see it like this, as opposed to having them like, you know, anything like that, or not perfectly parallel with each other. So you kind of lose out on that, and not being able to see the direction of the tire very easily on John's car, which is actually less of an angle now. Yeah, I just think it's not quite as good. That one I'm not in love with. This is just an interesting angle, kind of close to the quintessential drift angle, but I don't know. This one I think is good. I enjoy seeing the face here again. It's just interesting seeing it gives a humanist like part to the event. It makes you feel, you know, it gives a little bit of emotion to it. So I enjoyed that. Speaking of human emotion, I'm probably only going to keep one of those. I just don't need two separate people photos. And that one gives me more to play with, so I'm just going to keep that one. This one is kept due to potential lighting. This was around sunset, so the lighting could be really nice, but it's hard to say. And then these two were these ultra wides. Again, could potentially be really cool. Hard to say, so I'll have to wait. This one, the idea was get the background. Unfortunately, you know, so late, it gives off the vibe that not a lot of people are here because the stands aren't very full. But you would notice if you like focused on the photo more that there's a ton of people, like lines of people just right at the yellow line, you know, waiting in anticipation to see who wins. And so I don't know if that gives off the right vibe, but we'll see. I can probably increase shadows, and I mean, that showcases them enough. We'll see. We'll see. This one, you get the front of the cars. Always a positive. So I think for now, we'll keep it down to these. I know this is a bit more than expected, but I think that's probably safe. I mean, it's going to go with about 15. We have 20. I'll cut some more out that I don't need later, but let's start editing. So this one is photo number 1 of Tyler while drifting. I already did crop this one in a bit. I like the angle. I've already spoken on this a little bit before about drifting and angle of motion when viewing drifting and how kind of different it is. Whereas normally you would want to have the leading tires be lower in the frame because it helps convey the idea of motion. It's just the human doesn't expect the motion to be moving upwards in a vehicle, in a frame at least. It's either like straight or lower. But on a drift car, the leading tires are the rear tires. And so you move that motion, or you move the angle to be the opposite. You could of course go straight like that, and I think that's fine, but I think it doesn't convey as much. It doesn't convey how crazy it is. It doesn't convey how, you know, like how much ruckus is just going on while you're doing this. And so I think this is a bit nicer to have like a minor Dutch angle, when in reality this actually isn't really much of an angle. This is pretty similar to what you would see when you're actually just in the car, but it looks like an angle. Let's start editing. So I'm going to bring the highlights down, shadows up, just because it's so dark. And just little little bit of contrast, not too much contrast, I think, just because weirdly enough, this photo already has a bit. Which is the reason I say that's weird is because evergreen is pretty gross. There's not a lot of contrast, not a lot of color. And so when you get lucky enough to actually have contrast and color without a lot of editing, it makes it a little bit easier. We're gonna move the texture up a little higher than I normally would, I think, actually, just because there is a lot of motion blur on this image. And then an interesting thing I found is when I'm shooting with my Sony's, I will drop my clarity down by a little bit, but not too much. And I was shooting those, or I was editing those photos for the Cars and Cameras event earlier today, and I shot those with the Leica, and I was like dropping the clarity so far down. And I don't know why I edit so differently depending on the camera. Gonna dehaze it a little to bring some contrast in a way that only contrasts the highlights, so we don't just lose a bunch of detail in the shadows there by adding dehaze. I do want to look, so you can't see what I'm doing right now. I'm behind my face, but I'm on the histogram and I'm clicking the white triangle on the left that is show shadow clipping. I do that so I can see the clipping of the shadows. I'll show you what that means. You can see here the blue when I bring that exposure way down. That will kind of what is too dark to have any data in. So there's literally no data being shown there. You can do highlight clipping and that'll be the same thing. I'll show you, it'll get red. So up there, there's absolutely no data there. It's just nothing when I do that. The clipping is really useful. Not as much for digital media, but extremely useful for print, because if you don't have data there, your printer does not know what to print. In fact, it can't print anything. So luckily the printers are smart enough, when your shadows are clipped, it will just be nothing. You know, it'll be pure black. And when the highlights are clipped, it just won't print ink there. And so it's not dumb. It's not going to like glitch out, but it is going to result in some funky colors in print if you're ever doing that. So keep that in mind if you are shooting for print. You don't want to clip really at all, basically. And if you do clip, just make it, sparing. Make sure it's not a ton of clipping all over the place, because it will start to affect that print quality quite a bit. All right, let's mess with the curves here. I often bring shadows down in the curves, even if I've, in the basic panel, brought them up. In this one I didn't, but I'm not 100% sure if they actually do different things. In my brain they do, so I always kind of bring them down there. But who knows. Doing the blue tone curve and making the shadows a bit warmer. I just really like that look lately, and it's helping, I think, for the reds. Making sure Linguini's okay in the back. I don't know if you can see right above my head, right there. My cat is getting warm on my computer that I probably should turn off every once in a while. All right, let's make Tyler's very red car even more red. Up the saturation there. One thing I kind of want to be careful about is keeping it true to the real color of the car. Within reason. I do change the colors a little bit, but within reason, but not affecting the ground too much, because the ground on these in evergreen is really, it's weird. In reality, it looks like normal concrete, right? But in images, it always comes up kind of orangey, and I don't love it. It's definitely not my favorite look, and so when I see it looking like that, I always will kind of try to move away from that. And in Lightroom, that'll usually come up as yellow and orange colors, and so I'll kind of try to, tone them down a bit or bring them back a little. But the downside with that is that you'll have other portions of the image that are that color too. So sometimes I'll mask out the subject, mask out the car, and fix that, but sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, very carefully figuring out what you're saturating and desaturating, so things a little overdone. In this case, you'll notice yellow is really affecting the green trees, the like definitely very green trees. I'm not sure if that's something that other cameras will interpret like that, but Sony, your greens are usually yellow. So this is kind of a case showing how creating a color can be nice in one zone and then really bad in another, right? So this smoke here, the smoke is a little blue. And in reality, in real life, if you ever look at cars drifting, that smoke is a little bit blue. Tires don't give off white, like pure white smoke. They give off smoke that is a little darker. I mean, it's a black tire that's, you know, that's rolling around and falling off. So the smoke is not pure white. Cameras seem to really showcase how blue it can be though, or how blue they can interpret it as. And I don't necessarily love that, so I'll kind of do away with the blue here. But if you notice, the sky loses all of its color, and so I don't really love that. So one thing I'll probably do later is I'll go in and I will mask this stuff out, make this less blue here, make sure we keep the blue in the sky. And that's really easy to do. I'll show you how to do it in a little bit, especially if you're messing with one color. That's a simple prospect. Messing with luminance, I like to make sure the car stands out but isn't overly bright and doesn't look like it shouldn't be there. But I am going to mask the car out in this one, mostly because of that windshield. Now I kind of messed it up, but also for some other reasons, and I'll show you those in a sec. We are now in the color grading section, grading the shadows right now. I know I made the shadows warmer earlier. I'm going to kind of combat myself here, fight myself a little and make them a little darker in the shadows. Or a little bluer in the shadows, and then midtones will make those a little warm. If you guys are wondering why it's like very warm at first, I like to go, you know, further than I need to when I'm initially doing this, because it gives me a better idea of what colors I'm affecting and the overall color hue that I'm making the color space. In this case, the midtones, and then I'll drag it way down. So about there, and then highlights. I'm probably not going to mess with these. Yeah, maybe I will a little. Make them just a tinge yellow, and then again drag them way down. I think it looks reasonably nice. I think the color's still there. I think overall that's pretty nice. I'm going to go in to lens correction and take a look at what that natural vignette would have looked like. Not too bad. A little bit of vignette. Actually, this is the original vignette. There we go. Undo the after vignette. Distortion. So this is interesting, right? Normally you would do these automatically, but kind of like the barrel distortion a little bit, or do I even like it the other way around? It's hard to say. So that's distortion, like normal, that's what it came like. Okay, it is better, definitely corrected, but is it even better overcorrected? I think I'm going to overcorrect it by like the tiniest amount. I don't know, it's just a little bit interesting. Okay, let's mess with that first. New edits or new updates. I don't want to do AI landscape, thank you very much. Okay, make sure auto mask isn't tagged. We'll just simply get all of this, and then we're just going to warm up the blues. I'm gonna see if I can grab blues. I might be able to. Oh, perfect. That's even easier. So we can grab blues. We'll just desaturate the blues right there. Make the range smaller so it doesn't affect everything. And desaturate the blues just a little bit. Not bad. Not bad at all. I'm actually going to go back in. This time we'll turn auto mask on, so I only hit this area. Don't have to be insanely perfect about this again, because I'm really only going to be targeting this single color. But just right there, and resaturate that back in. So that gives me the blue from the wall back in, but still you lose a lot of the blue from the smoke, which I think just looks overall a bit better, and that way we keep the blue in our sky there. Let's do one, oh, don't need a red eye correction. Let's do one more mask here on the car. We're gonna do an object mask. Again, you can choose object mask, or you can do the subject mask. In this case, we're gonna do the object mask. I think assumed it was gonna work a little bit better since there is that blur and just a little bit of confusion. Mask off a portion that is technically the car, but super hard to see. And then I'm gonna drop my density down about 80% and continue to mask with auto mask off around the edges to blur and kind of make the car look like it fits in. I didn't mean blur, I meant kind of fade in, feather in the mask. This way the edges of the car blend more seamlessly with what's around the car. And I think it just kind of looks a little bit nicer. We're gonna up the shadows a bit, and we're gonna drop the highlights a little bit. Because this is so bright up here, it's not my favorite. And a little bit of contrast. I'm gonna try some saturation boost. Okay, that's actually not too bad. We'll stick with that saturation boost, and then we're gonna go in and mask out just the windshield. I'm gonna try an object mask on this one. I don't think this is gonna work, but not bad. Not bad. Gonna kind of finish that mask up. Just draw into the windshield there and then erase what I don't need here. That's not gonna work, so that's only gonna erase the brush. There we go. Erase just what we don't need up at the top. And again, I know this mask isn't perfect. If this car was stationary, I don't think this mask would cut it. But since the car's moving, we get a little bit of leeway here. And what I'm doing here is just darkening that windshield to give it the view, or the kind of the look as though we did have the polarizer and we used it properly. I'm gonna take another quick look at this section. We're gonna erase a little along here just so that doesn't look too dark. I guess that just was pretty dark already. Okay, that was just really dark already. And then again around here and just a little bit around there. Bring the density down again. Make this really big so it's really feathered. And we're just gonna kind of go that side. I'm actually gonna go even bigger and even less density just around the edge here. There we go. I think that looks pretty nice. Looks somewhat realistic to what a properly polarized windshield would have looked like. Bring the highlights back up and just drop the shadows a little more. Not too bad, not too bad. I might go in and kind of fix that a little bit, but not too bad at all. Then we're gonna zoom out, and I'm going to use one of my presets here called Dark Ground and subtract the subject. Is that gonna get me? Looks like it did, perfect. So this is just a preset like mask that I've created. It's very simple. It literally just makes things darker. And it supports the slider, the amount slider, so you can just drop the amount of that so it doesn't look like it's just pitch black down there. Alright, I think that's pretty nice. Go back to the very beginning to import, like that, and to the end. Not bad. Alright, let's scoot along. I'm gonna move away from the Tyler ones real quick. Let's do this big one. So, not my favorite. Again, this one we're just kind of doing just to have that shot though of everything here. all the show cars, all the specifically right-hand drive show cars. This is going to be a much simpler edit. So this is something I just wanted to show you guys real quick. So see this JZX, that's a chaser, right? The chaser, yeah. These are chasers, yeah. These are chasers. Okay, here, real quick, if you guys wanted to know, that's a Mark II. That's what that looks like. And then these are all chasers. So many people don't know the difference between JZX 100s, JZX 90s. A lot of people will call them Mark II chasers, etc., etc. They are very slightly different, especially in the JZX 100 era. The Mark II is really easy to tell the difference from the rear end, but from the front, a little bit tougher. And then chasers and Mark IIs for the JZX 90 era, nobody knows the difference. It's funny. Like, everyone will consider them the same vehicle. But anyways, what I was going to say about the white car. So if you look at this white chaser here, and then I'm going to bring the clarity way down, what you'll notice is it gains like a glow around it. And that happens with bringing the clarity down, but that also is pretty reminiscent of something called a mist filter. So if you don't have a mist filter, you haven't purchased one, you don't have enough money for one, whatever, that is a potentially helpful fix or kind of way to make it look like you do have a mist filter or give you that mist aesthetic. It works specifically with highlights. So if you look at, let's look at this stage here right here, over here on the side. When I bring the clarity down, it doesn't gain a blur around it. It doesn't gain any sort of kind of glow around it. So it really only works with highlights, which is very similar to what a mist filter does. And like fundamentally, the clarity slider is essentially doing what a mist filter does. But I'm not going to go into all the science of that. It's obviously not doing exactly what it does, but it's very similar. So don't go crazy on it, but it can kind of give you a little bit of a mist effect. Bring the whites down a tad bit, and in a weird twist of fate, the blacks up, which I almost never do. All right, details, sharpening up, but making sure we only sharpen the edges. And then some tone curves. A little bit orange and a little bit blue, just making things look ever so slightly nicer. And then we'll go into the slider tone curve. This one you can adjust via the region selections down here in the highlights, lights, dark shadows, or you can adjust it on the tone curve. The difference between this one, the slider curve, and the point curve here is the point curve, you select points and you change things based on those points, and that's like your only option. On the slider curve, you change things based on their regions. So you can affect the darks here. If you slide down, you can affect the shadows here. You can bring them back to normality just like that, or you can adjust them on the sliders down here and it'll do the same thing. And it'll show you the region you're adjusting. But I prefer mostly to use this one. I'll go in and use the other one a little too because it gives you a lot more freedom for specific things. But for this one, I think it's easier to just use that one. Okay, color mixer, gonna be a bit because we are dealing with a bunch of different colors. So I just want to kind of look at everything. Holding down Alt, helpful. I think Alt or Option on Mac, helpful for this because you can see what you're affecting. In this case, I don't want a purple ground, so I'm going to keep those yellows up a little bit. Similar, the greens are really only hitting the grass, a tent, and a car in the very bottom. So we'll change out a tiny bit, but not too much. Aqua's surprisingly just tapping those greens again. Actually, a fair bit of the R34 there in the middle, so I don't want to mess with that too much. Blues, that's going to be my skies. I like a tealish blue. You don't have to. It's up to you. It's just my style. And we're going to saturate those blues a bit as well. Lose some saturation along almost all the other colors. And I'll keep it in for the oranges and the reds for that JZX. And we'll lose a lot of it in the yellow to kind of just make that the ground not stand out quite as much. This one's going to be quicker edit for sure. Okay, I think that's okay. I might change. Let's look at what Lightroom has to say. Very orange. Not horrible though, I guess. Like the world looks better, but the ground looks oranger. And trade-offs if I don't want to go in and mask like crazy. Do some color shading here. What's up, Don? How's it going, man? Whoa, Don and Derek here? You guys might actually meet. For once. Okay, and midtones. Oh man, the boss man's here too. Am I gonna get fired if I do this too long? I guess it's not work hours. Alright, I think that's pretty good. Highlights. Make them a little blue. Most of our highlights are just kind of up in the sky anyways, so just gonna mess with those. Not bad. I think the shadows I'm gonna bring in a little bit more. Midtones a little more as well. Actually, yeah, just kill off the midtones. That looks fine. Quick, someone page him. Oh, dude, we don't have pagers. Okay, I'm gonna stick with that one. This is going on Instagram. Put 4x5. Put it like that. Make it done. Snazzy. Good to go. All right, let's move into this one. We're gonna crop this one a bit because not getting the whole car means I want to crop more of the car, make it look like I did it on purpose and I didn't just zoom in too much, which it's possible that's what I did. But I want to get the driver and I want to get the tire smoke, so maybe that. Actually, that might less smoke. I'll look at the midpoint here. Pressing O to do this, by the way, so if you guys are looking at, if you're in the crop mode and you want to look at different grid lines, you can press O and go through a bunch of different grid lines. This one will give you the exact middle. The only ones that are specifically different are these like diagonal lines, and if you press Shift O, you can change them, so you can different diagonals. This is your golden ratio, and then your golden spiral, you can change this a bunch. I'm not sure why you can change it 8 different times instead of 4 different times. It gives you the golden spiral for if your aspect ratio was like flipped 90 degrees, so if you were vertical. I don't know why it does that, because this is no longer the golden ratio or the golden spiral if it's, you know, stretched like this, but it would be if we were flipped vertically. So I'm not so sure why it gives you that one, but whatever. Anyways, we're going to go back to the center one just so I can kind of see what the center of this image is. Like, would it be nice to have the center of the image be right on the wheel? Potentially. Potentially, but we do lose a lot of smoke, so maybe if I gain more there, do it like that. That's not bad. That's not bad. Maybe I'll leave it like that for now. I'm going to bring it back to my golden ratio there just so I have time. But you don't have to. All right, let's go through and edit this one. I do have my calibration and stuff kind of preset. That's just a preset style that I use. But you can always go into calibration and mess with that stuff too. A lot of people don't mess with the calibration, and it's like a very easy way to completely, you know, change up your colors. Like, this is super different, right? And it's how Lightroom will understand your color space. So if you use the calibration tool, and ideally before you edit almost everything else, it'll interpret your colors based on the different calibration of those colors. And so it's a pretty useful tool that I think it, you know, a lot of people miss, and it's unfortunate because it's really helpful. So again, Lightroom is just being weird here. So white balance, as shot, very blue. Auto, very orange. I don't know why, but this is also kind of an issue of Evergreen Speedway. No, like, you know, contrast. like the literal Speedway just doesn't have a ton of different colors. And because of that, you get a lot of monotony. And so it is really important that the cars have a lot of color in them. And it's really important that you can bring color out of a minimal amount when you're editing. But that's okay. We'll do what we have. I'm actually going to bring the highlights pretty high up on this one. Really want that smoke. And I think you probably noticed I brought the contrast up quite a bit too. I'm going to keep exposure pretty similar. It's up 0.05, otherwise pretty similar, and shadows down. Blacks down a little bit too, just to bring in some nice contrast. And whites up ever so slightly. Clarity I'm going to drop a little bit as well. I tend to just always drop the clarity a tiny bit. I don't love super clear photos or like grungy photos that you get out of sliding that clarity slider way up. But to combat the lack of detail, or the loss of detail you get when you take the clarity slider down, I add a little bit of texture, which helps, I think. And we'll dehaze literally the smallest amount possible. And just a typical mask. Make sure we're just edge sharpening again. But I do want to make sure that the edges we're grabbing and sharpening are the actual edges I want. If I go too low, then I might not sharpen enough, but you know, I don't want to sharpen the smoke, so I don't want to be down here either. That should be good. Right around there, I think. That looks nice. Tone curve, same thing. Gonna start with the blues and oranges. That already looks so much nicer. Just adding a little bit of orange down there really helps, especially since this photo was so blue in the beginning. Very much helps. It's, again, pretty far up here in our curves, just to really accentuate that smoke. Really give off the, you know, just showcase the fact that this car was producing a ton of smoke. Okay, this is already looking so much better just from a little bit of editing here. We're going to go into the color mixer here and just kind of fine tune the colors on the car. I'm not super worried about other colors, but you will notice that there's some orange up here I was going to say the grandstands, but I actually don't know where that is. I think these are probably other media people, because that looks like it's a van back there, so this might be the pits behind the car. Who knows? I don't know where I was. And then this is there's big light stands in the middle of the speedway, and so we want those to not be extremely, you know, like eye-catching by making their colors super nice or super vibrant or anything. So while we do this color, the hue changing and the eventual saturation changing, I might go back in and desaturate these a little bit later, just to make sure they don't take away from the view of the vehicle. This is a personal thing. I'm going to show you what it looks like over here very clearly on here, but I don't like the color. And this is much closer to the original color. So no offense, Spec D, I just don't like your yellow. So I usually will make it a little bit oranger. A little more like the yellow you see on the double yellow lines in the street. I just think that looks a little bit nicer. Just a little though. In fact, I'm even going to pull it back a little more. There we go. Greens. Looks like I'm affecting literally nothing in this image. Cyan, or aqua, literally nothing in the image. Blues, of course, affecting a ton. Because remember, those shadows were extremely blue. Bring those up just a tad. Magenta. Couple colors in the background. You can really start to mess with colors here. So the reason this is happening, I think at least, is I have removed chromatic aberration on in the lens correction. And if I change my magenta, or was I in purple? If I change my purples to a color that is then captured by that remove chromatic aberration, it'll start to lose them. I think. Let's test that theory. Nope, I was wrong. Yeah, I think it's just a weird way of dealing with that color. Just can't deal with it artifacts too much. So I'll leave purple as it is. And I am going to drop magenta a little because that loses some saturation, but luckily that looks like that'll lose saturation here, so we'll drop some saturation down there, and then we don't have to mask this stuff out later. Add some saturation in the reds. I think that looks pretty nice. And then we will add some saturation in the oranges, add some in the yellow, just bring a lot of pop to the car. Green doesn't matter, aqua shouldn't matter too much, and blue matters a bit. We'll take a little bit of color off the blue. Let me know if you guys can hear the fan in the background. My computer fan just decided to turn on, just the first in a while. Is this thing hot? It's kind of hot. Not super hot. Surprised the fan turned on, but I guess doing all this plus streaming is a bit. Okay, let me take out the color in here, this little box here. Close? Not perfect. Close. Just add, oh, I'm erasing. Add some more along here, make sure my density's back up to 100. And like I said before when I was editing some colors, we can kind of go overboard here because we're gonna specifically target this color. We'll add the range a little more and take some color out of that. I'm not going to darken it because that looks a little off, but there we go. Just a little bit of color out of there. Make sure eyes don't go towards that as much. Keep the eyes on the car. I think that looks definitely quite a bit nicer. Out a little bit here to darken the ground. And I'm going to do two things here. So I'm going to darken the ground a little. Select the subject, cut that out, look at it, make sure it's cutting out properly, which it kind of is. It does have a little bit there, but that's okay. Then make the feathering a little nicer so the ground's not too dark, but I'm going to do the opposite actually on the top. I don't think I actually recreated this one yet, so I'm going to show you real quick. I do have a haze filter, and this is not what I'm going to do because it'll drop a lot of the kind of the detail here, but it is similar to what I'm going to do. So I'm going to bring in another linear gradient along the top. I'm going to kind of have it like this, a little bit tilted to the side, and then I'm going to just preemptively subtract a little out of this side because I know I don't want it really attacking the whites too much on that smoke. But from here, we're going to up that exposure, lower some contrast, up some highlights, up some shadows, up some blacks, up whites actually will probably leave. Drop a little bit of saturation just for this one. Normally I wouldn't draw the saturation just by doing this, but we're going to do it here. And then we're going to go to the curve, just a point curve here, take the midtones, bring them up a little. The like secular highlights, the really, really bright highlights up in the top here, I'm going to bring down slightly because I don't want those super bright. Because I don't want my highlights clipping over here on that truck. But I think that overall, yeah, I think that looks pretty good. It makes it look like there's a smoky environment around, and it kind of makes it still calls attention to the vehicle. And I do think we're going to do one more little change, just one more mask to make the vehicle a little brighter while keeping everything else dark. There we go. Objects. Could not think for a sec there. Encapsulate the vehicle. We're going to work with this one for a little bit. I'll fix that in a sec. All right. A little bit brighter. Highlights up, shadows up, but then contrast up and blacks down. Just a teeny bit. Just so, again, it looks realistic, but it pops just a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, now let's actually fix this brush in the smoke. Nice. Looks good. Oh, don't move that. Looks good. And then, are we gonna have to cut the window? I think we may have to cut that window a little. So I'm gonna use the auto mask here to make sure I don't mask out too much. I wanna be smart about this, although it is barely working. It's just masking out the car, or the driver, and the helmet anyways. That's okay, we'll fix in a sec. Auto mask is almost perfect, but definitely not perfect. Alright, not too bad. I really don't think this matters too much. I don't think I'm gonna gain or lose too much out of doing this, but I'm a maniac, so gotta make it look nice. Making it real small. Okay. What does that actually look like? Did that do much of anything? Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that looks better. I think the pixel peeper in us will detect that. Cool. Okay, I'm going to do one more thing with that mask and literally just up saturation a tiny bit. Bring some color to that car. Perfect. Okay, I think that looks pretty good for this image at least. I'm not convinced this is an incredible image, but it is what it is. This again is a very similar image. We're going to skip ahead. Let's do this one. I think this one's going to be interesting because I'm going to cut this closer in. Now this one is potentially going to be used for like a media card. So media for events, specifically for Driftcon, but for most like automotive events, media will have this little card. I wish I could like show you guys. It's about this big or so. I don't know how you can see how big that is to my face. But that card will have a photo of it, say Driftcon, say whatever event that it's a part of, and then it will have a like schedule or some guidelines or requirements in the back, and each one of those cards has to be made for almost every event. And those cards usually don't want to utilize the same photo or the same media over and over again, so they will kind of need these card shots. And kind of similar if you're like a sports photographer, you have like rookie cards for the athletes. So it's kind of as close to that as you get in the motorsports world. So I'm going to crop this in a fair bit now that I've been talking about that. The reason I'm not centering this is because I want to showcase that motion again. So I want the smoke here. I want it to look like the car is moving somewhere. And I am going to switch its angle. Again, I know this is kind of opposite of what you would normally do, having it angled up like this instead, but I am going to do that because I think it just looks a little bit nicer. This one is going to need some changes when it comes to its because this is not very sharp. So I'm going to have to go in and sharpen this stuff up later. I don't have the stream set up so I can do that right now, but I'll show you guys what I will do, or would do. So normally I would right click on the image when I'm done with it and go to edit in, and then I have these other options here. What I would use for this specifically is called Topaz Photo AI. I think there's a lot of stuff you can do with the Topaz stuff. I don't touch it very much. All I really use it for is sharpening. It just sharpens better than Lightroom does, and so you can kind of make minute changes. I think it overdoes it for a lot of stuff, so it'll preach like, oh, I can completely fix motion blur and completely fix like camera shake. I don't know if it can do that very much, or at least not good enough with it. I haven't looked into it too much, but what it can do is edge sharpen really well, and edge sharpening gives off the kind of the idea or like the vibe that it has like really sharpened and really made something look sharp and nice, especially on social media where you don't really look at it really close. So I will utilize that later, and then some other stream I'll make it so you can actually see that window. I just have all other windows turned off at the moment, and it would take a second to activate it, so it would take a little too much time on this one. So otherwise we're doing the same stuff, clarity down and texture up a little. Bringing the texture too far up on an image where the subject isn't really sharp kind of makes it look kind of gritty, kind of bad, to be frank, in my opinion. So I'm not going to do that too much. Keep in mind that the driver is in focus, and so I don't want to, do so much for this vehicle and then, overcook the driver. This is shot at 1/100th f5.6. I probably should have just shot it at a higher ISO, and then been able to bring my shutter speed up a tiny bit. I wanted to get a little bit of motion in the background, and I think I did, but using this teleconverter kind of makes it harder for your images to be sharp. At least I found that out, but I found that out at this event, so what are you gonna do? Let's make it a little bit warmer, I think. This showcases really well how the ground at Evergreen really appears warm if you make like the rest of the photo look nice. So I mean, if to kind of put it in perspective, this smoke still is really blue, right? Like this is extremely blue smoke. You would think this guy has a horrible oil leak or something, but the ground is already pretty orange. In order to get that smoke to be white, like that's like here, like that's crazy. So I don't want the smoke to be too blue, but I don't want the ground to be too orange. So that is where masking comes in, and it is a pain in the ass. We're gonna add the tint to be a little green as well, just because it kind of takes away from the magenta that the road will shoot off. And just a tiny bit of extra exposure. And I'm not gonna do saturation here. I'll do saturation later. Here's a little bit of where we can do some of our sharpening to help bring a little bit of detail back in the car, but not too much. And I'm gonna go through and denoise this one later too. You can kind of see a bit of noise. Well, I assume you guys can kind of see a little bit of noise in the image here. It's not horrible. I don't hate noise. I don't hate grain. But on this one, because there's no color really, except for the car, I don't know, it just looks a little off. I know I was talking about how orange the ground is, but I'm still gonna make the rest of the shadows a bit orange. They're a bit yellow, I guess. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know that I'm gonna kind of mess with it later. And since I'm gonna mess with it later, I can kind of, mess with the colors and ruin them a little, knowing that I'm gonna redo it or fix it later in post. Well, I guess I'm in post. Later in post. Ugh. This is one thing I see a lot, so if you guys are, anyone here is an editor. One thing I see a lot is these like really, really dark darks. I'm not sure if it's, your monitor or just your vibe, but I would urge you to take a second look at your darks and see if maybe they are a little too dark. Take a look on a second screen, take a look on a friend's screen, take a look on your phone, stuff like that, and see if your darks are just a little too dark, because I think sometimes people will try to like stylize it, and I used to do this all the time, and it'll just become really, really dark as opposed to like super nicely styled or anything. And not to say that your style is bad. If that is your style, you can definitely do dark really well. In fact, it's something that I struggle with doing really well. So I could just be talking out of my own struggles and my own like insecurities with having extreme dark images, but in my opinion, I see it a lot in the car world. where images are just real dark. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so yellows, luckily, do not affect the car much at all. A little bit of the lights, a little bit of the wheel, pretty much nothing else. So I can just get rid of the yellows and like almost completely lose that really, really orange road. So that's really, really helpful. Don't have to go in and do a lot of thing. We have the other benefit here of not really having anything blue in the background. So I'm just going to drop the blues down a whole bunch, and there goes our blue smoke. Now the only potential downside here is we just lost a lot of color. Is that going to be an issue? We will find out. I think we're okay though. Drop some yellows just because it drops down the color in the windshield reflection. Same with the greens. Okay. I think we're good there. A little bit of color grading. We could really go with the orange and teal look here, just because the car is orange. I think that's an easy one. This is like super reminiscent of my old style, especially at Evergreen. I think Evergreen has so little color that I really try to, or I used to at least really try to over edit Evergreen a lot, and it would result in me doing things like this where I would just try to push color out of places that it didn't exist. And I would, really split tone and really color things like this. And I think that it has its place. I don't think that it's inherently bad, but I do think that it can make an image look a little silly sometimes. So I think like subtlety is key when editing things like this. When editing really artistic photos, or editing something to make it look like film, or editing film, or editing, various ideas where you have a lot more color to play around with, or the image is a lot more stylized, there's 100% of time and a place for it. But here, I just think maybe keeping the colors a little bit more in check is probably the way to go. Now this is a global adjustment. This adjusts literally, it's essentially an adjustment layer on top that changes the color of everything. If you're used to editing video, that's like your offset layer. Sometimes I mess with that. Looks like I'm not going to this time, but sometimes I would. Okay, to add a little bit of contrast to the overall scene, we are going to do a similar thing to what we did before. Darken that ground up. Cut the car out. Doesn't look too bad. This time I am going to try the haze in the background because there really isn't anything back there that we need. No, I don't think I like that too much. Well, maybe if we can kind of decolor it. Okay, that's not too bad. Yeah, that's not bad at all. That accentuates the smoke, makes it look like there is more smoke. Cut the driver out again so the car is in better view. Okay, I zoomed way out, right? So I zoom out a lot of this, or a lot of the time, to get an idea of the whole image, so I can just kind of like, I don't have to use my peripheral vision and look around the image to see everything. And this is just the before and after of this one. I think that's solid. Really a lot of lack of color, just showcasing the color of the vehicle a ton. I don't know if that's the right move, but it's what we did. I'm going to go in through here and add some saturation to the vehicle. Actually, I won't saturate the whole vehicle. I'm going to saturate the oranges. Not that much. Ooh, wow, that saturates quick. Okay. Brighten it up a tiny bit. What did it originally look like? A lot of times I'll go back and forth to kind of see the original color of the orange and see if we can at least kind of match it. A little bit more red. Well, it's just going to be kind of hard to match. We could match this a little more if we changed the calibration. So I'm going to go in and do that just a tiny bit. Just move these reds. Just a little. It almost matches it less. Okay, move them up a little. There we go. All right, I'll be here forever if I keep trying to do this. We'll leave it at that for now. Should I do that one? I'm gonna do one of these overhead ones. I like how these look. Let's do this one. This was a tough one actually. I don't know if I'll be able to use this. I thought I would, but gotta get in close to have these vehicles imaged or like have them, you know, properly framed. That's a bit closer than I had originally anticipated here. If only they were like 2 frames lower. In fact, do I have a shot where they're a little lower and still in focus? Ugh. The 300, the prime, it let me down. Yeah, if only I was shooting not on a prime here. If I was shooting at 70 to 200 or something and then cropped in, definitely would have been better for the shot. But that's okay. I think this is all right. Yeah, that's okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. Does that lens correction do anything? Okay, tiny bit. Again, white balance is a maniac. That's not too bad. This is one thing that's really weird to me. Like, look at this track. This is pretty all right. Dark, nice contrast. It's clearly a different color. And then you go all the way up here, and it's like so bright and orange and just kind of Like, I just don't know why. It's just not my vibe. It's the only unfortunate thing about Evergreen. Like, the colors are just weird. And it's not even necessarily the track. Like, the track has colors. It's just, for whatever reason, probably a little bit a mix of the timing of the events. You'll notice on some of the After Dark events, people will get like really interesting images because the sun is actually lower and you have more opportunity and more time to shoot with directional shadow. But during these events, it's, you know, sun's right above you. Luckily, this one was reasonably overcast, but it just does a weird thing to the ground. Just makes it not what I want it to look like. Don't know why. It's just never quite perfect. All right, dropping that clarity down, dehazing a little. Dehazing is a little weird because it ruins my smoke a little here, right? So, like, that looks horrible. I don't. It's like I hate the smoke, so I'm trying to get rid of it, but I don't want that. But I do want to kind of dehaze on the vehicles a bit. So we'll dehaze a little here, and I'll probably come back in and then brighten the smoke up later. I could, darken the cars later, but I think the smoke will be easier to brighten up. Vibrance and saturation, I think we're going to kind of leave. Saturation just a tad bit. Details, edge shadows again. Just make them look nice. That reminds me, we'll go back to this image real quick and denoise it. So we're going to use the AI denoiser in Lightroom. Is this AI? Who knows? I feel like this is one of those things that is AI. Like, very similarly to how every company that wants you to buy their product uses AI right now. This was one of Lightroom's and Adobe's first AI things that they did. And I don't know that it's AI. I think it's an algorithm. I think it's a very static algorithm that takes in a couple variables and then spits out the answer because it's doing the exact same task for every single image. But I don't want to get into AI. We don't need to do that right now. I just don't think that that's AI. But you could prove me wrong. I'm sure Adobe has like a white paper on it somewhere that has written up exactly what it's doing. And maybe it totally is AI. I could be super off. What in the world? Oh, stacked. So that's it. I'll zoom in to kind of show you what we got away with. This is super zoomed in, right? 400% zoomed in. That to that. That's pretty good. Cuts a lot of the grain out. Just makes it look a little bit smoother. Like I said, with this image, we're going to go back in and kind of sharpen it up anyways later, but for the time being, getting rid of that just helps a tiny bit. All right, back to here. Linguini's making noises back there. All right, back to here. We'll bring some color to the ground, some color to the scene and the shadows. We're going to do very similar in the highlights up here. I want to see what happens if I mess with the reds a little. I don't want to, I don't know that I want, nope, no thanks. Absolutely a place for messing with that stuff, but it is not here. Definitely no like professional when it comes to curves, but I have noticed that if you really mess with the color curves, with the RGB curves in an image that doesn't have a ton of RGB to start with, so a ton of color to start with, you mess with those curves too much and it is so easy to take yourself so far off what an image should have looked like. It's so easy to just introduce artifacting and cause just tons of issues in your image because it's trying to bring out this color that really barely existed. And for the vast majority of us shooting on, at most 14-bit RAW cameras, I think most of us are probably still shooting on like 12-bit RAWs. And the few select people shooting on 16-bit, they'll be able to bring more out of it, but even then not so much more that you would really notice in a situation that already didn't have a lot of color. But the 12-bit RAW guys out there trying to bring a lot of color out of these images, I could see it being tough when you're starting to really mess with the curves and trying to bring color out of those specifically. Tyler's car here is so interesting with the livery. Pink and red, it looks great in person. It is tough to edit. I guess it's not even really pink, right? Like that's more of a purple. Where's Tyler? Someone at Tyler Mayer and ask him what color his livery is. I think it's more purple. Okay, a little more color in the reds, a little bit of color in the yellows because I really like to accentuate these lines. I don't know why. I just think it's interesting. I think it's fun to bring some color onto the track when I get the opportunity to do so. I say as I wipe the blues off the face of the earth. One of the reasons I do that is black cars, right? They will really reflect the sky. And so it shows up as blue in a lot of scenarios. So you kind of get rid of that, make the car the color that it actually is. It can be nice. It can also completely ruin things. So, take a look at the whole scene when you're doing it. Have a good grasp at what you're doing. Luminance, we're actually going to bring Tyler's car down a tad bit. Orange is probably, down a little bit. Yellows, down just a little bit too. I think sometimes when I'm messing with luminance, I'll find out that I might have just overexposed the image in the basic panel because I start to bring everything down a little. Totally, reasonable to realize your mistakes, to realize what you've done and fix it. It's probably better not to fix it like I'm doing it right now in the luminance panel and just go back and lower that exposure a little, but where's the fun in that? All right, shadows. What are we looking for? Nostalgia up in the yellows here. Some Kodak gold, or we want to bring it down the greens and blues, teals. I think I'm gonna bring it down to the blues. I'm gonna split tone a little, and we're gonna see what this looks like. Again, I'm never gonna keep it like this. I'm not split toning to this degree and leaving it here, but I do like to split tone to a very heavy degree in the color grading panel first to have an idea of what colors I'm affecting and then bring them down. Also, I realize I haven't explained split toning. If anyone is interested or doesn't know or does know and needs a refresher, split toning is something that was super popular way back in the day, like in the kind of the beginning of Instagram era. One of the main filters was like a super split toned filter. I think it was called Nashville or something, and it is literally taking the tones of the shadows and the highlights. In this case, it doesn't take into account midtones as far as I know. It's just shadows and highlights, and you're toning them to be stretchy boy. You're toning them opposite. So shadows really blue, highlights really orange, or shadows really orange, highlights really blue, or shadows really magenta, highlights really green, etc., etc. It's just taking the opposite of that wheel and going, stretching it to the side so you can completely, literally split your tones. It's an interesting old technique. I'm sure it comes from film. I don't exactly know how they would have done it in film. I honestly never exposed color film on my own. That required an extra poisonous substance that I was not able to get access to when I was in high school. So I never got to experience actually creating my own color film. I only ever got to do black and white. All right. Not too bad, not too bad. What's up, dude? Let's see if we can get him to come over here. Linguini's a goofball, so he will meow and meow for me. And oh god, and bite my monitor. Don't do that. Alright. He'll do stuff like that. And then I'll pet him and he'll be like, "What are you doing? Don't touch me. You want to say something?" He says hello. Okay, we will try to maintain a Linguini in the lab. This might be difficult. He's a runner. Alright, color grading I think is probably done. I don't know. Not in love with it, but what I am going to do is I'm going to mask out the road and we're going to see what that looks like. Alright, Queen, can't go that way. Now to test if he can get out of my room. Okay, let's mask out these objects. That was flawless. I'm amazed. Okay, and we're going to invert this mask. Perfect. And let's look at taking some of the color off. Nah, not like that. Yeah, something like this. That's pretty good. That's almost perfect. Okay. So that'll get rid of some of that, like, that orangey road color on the bottom here. And then we're going to go in and do an extra mask to get rid of this ugly green color that we see up here. Auto mask was on, so there's a tiny bit there that got hit. Turn it off, take it out. A little bit blue. And a little bit blue, but mostly just desaturate. And a little, do I want? Okay, we'll do that. I think that looks pretty good. Just getting rid of some of that color that I don't want. You guys can't see it, but Linguini's being a pest in the background. Alright. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's finish up these masks here. Another little dark ground mask to force your eyes to look at the subjects instead. Will we haze up top? That's the real question. I don't know. Take the subject out of that haze. Drop the haze here. So one of the things I do with the haze is the clarity is all the way down. Bring a little bit of clarity back in, some texture back in. All right, I gotta go deal with the cat. Okay, we'll see. One sec, let me get this cat out of the way. All right. Alone at last. Okay, I think that looks actually pretty good. Brought a little clarity back to the haze, but it really accentuates the smoke and gets rid of some of the coloration there. We're gonna do one last bit, select these objects again. Let's hope it does it perfectly again. One more try. What a wonderful program Lightroom is. Bring the shadows up, bring the exposure up just a tiny bit, bring the contrast up, highlights down a little, a tinge of saturation. What happens if we go crazy? That's too crazy. Tinge of point color. Let's go to the blues and we'll take the blues down. Get rid of some blues in the car. Although, what did I just do to Tyler's car? Did that take a lot of blues out? No, we're good. No, don't set as rejected. Press the wrong button. Okay, let's get back to that mask. Okay. Took the blues out of John's car. Didn't affect Tyler's too much. Now I think we can afford to pump the saturation just a little bit here. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to take a little look at the yellows in the Spec D. Like I said, just make them a little oranger. Y'all gotta fix that green. I'm sorry, I've never shot for Spec D before, and I know that like any chance is just going right out the window. And they're just like, dude, why are you clowning on our colors? You don't even shoot for us. Shut the fuck up. All right. It's looking. I don't know, a couple of these images I think I'm going to have to do some extra work on, just kind of get an idea for what I want. Okay. Yeah, we'll bring the the exposure up a little, and then highlight. Exposure a little, highlights down, contrast up, clarity up a tiny bit, dehaze up a tiny bit to get that contrast on just the highlights, and then a tiny bit of extra texture, and then we will subtract from it with that kind of nice ease off. Yeah, it's got the smoke there. We'll just ease off along the bottoms here, just to blend the vehicle back into the background. We don't want it looking like it's been, photoshopped and pasted on. Just blend it in just a little. I blend it in a little bit more. Just along the edges. Okay. I don't think that's half bad. See the original, go all the way down to import, original, and current. Not too bad at all, not too bad at all. I seem to be on a just getting rid of color streak lately, but it is what it is. Okay, let's do this one. Just a nice, really sharp image. People in the background. Zoomed out quite a bit. I did shoot this at 300. I could have shot this at 600, I think, probably, but 300 will do. Crop in here. Now this is a case where he has too much angle, I think, to Dutch angle it like this. Like, I don't think that looks very nice, so we're just going to go straight. And we have two options. We can run the angle along the fence by using the ruler here, which it looks like we almost pretty much did, literally 0.01% more angle. Or we could run the angle along the vehicles, which would be a little bit more like that. And that's a whole, I guess, degree off, as opposed to 0.21 degrees. We're going to start like this, and then I might go in and change it later, depending on what I like. Let's get them properly centered and reutilize this. That's not too bad. I'm going to actually use the diamond. Oops. There we go. Kind of get an idea for the visual center as opposed to just the normal center. There's one thing I do a lot when I'm editing images. I take a look at what I think is kind of like the visual center of the image as opposed to what is the actual proper center. If you want to properly center an image, you know, it's doable and it's definitely has its merit. You know, I wouldn't ever say don't do that, but I a lot of times find, especially with vehicles, that if you center it perfectly, unless it's like a perfect profile shot, you know, like 90 degrees to the camera, it won't actually look right. And so I'll change that around on my own and kind of just get the idea of what I think is a good center. Definitely gonna need to change some shadows around here on the vehicle because I don't want to pump the shadows up too much in the real world. And then give it a bit of the sunlight that it had, the sun color that it had in real life. That's not too bad. I'm actually so surprised. What was my white balance? 3,500. Interesting. Okay, I am bringing whites up, and you can tell here, right here, that these are all, you know, this is just extremely crushed. So if you bring the whites down, you'll notice that it does it a bit. What you'll also notice is highlights does it a little bit in different areas. Pro tip with that, mask it out specifically. So we're just going to mask out these areas with the lights and with the highlight from the sun. And then you can see the highlights again. Now from here, we'll take whites down. Look at that. Perfect. Now you get details again if you are printing the image. Just a little bit of kind of a good way to slightly fix those things just a tad. It looks like I'm going to have to do it on the cars too. A little bit of dehaze. Probably are going to saturate this image a bit, but I don't want to oversaturate the colors that don't need to be saturated, so I'll do that saturation a little bit later when I'm in the mask modes. Now this image is probably going to be able to benefit from colors and curves a little more than some of the other ones because it already does have a little bit of color. So let's see what it looks like when we do this. So the method of split toning, just curve split toning. It's very similar to the other method of doing it. What I'm doing is introducing some blues into the shadows here. Just a little bit of blues in the shadows. And then some yellows in the highlights. And I think I'm going to bring the yellows out of the secular highlights, these really, really tall highlights up here. And because of that weird curve, I'm going to bring them in on the midtones too. Yeah, I don't know, this is a bit tough, trying to perfect this. Okay, we'll take the secular highlights off, take the midtones off. Okay, I think that's probably just keep it to 2 points on that one. That looks a bit better. So this is kind of just your standard S curve, but with the blue. I'm going to take a look at some of the other ones. I don't think I'm going to utilize these too much really, but we'll at least look at them. No, I just never mess with those greens. Yeah, leave the other two out. I'm going to mess with the point curve of just the standard point curve a little, I think. Just bring midtones up a tiny bit. Giving ever so slightly more contrast here. Just a little more. I think that makes the blues a little too blue, so keep messing with them. A little more orange, a little more yellow, I should say. This is like such a standard thing when editing photos, just going back and forth on the same tone curves. Same, edit the same whatever you're on, just over and over again, trying to make things look just a little bit better, just ever so slightly better. It's always a tough game. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this highlight viewer on the histogram just because having the red showcase on the roofs of the cars is a little bit annoying. We're going to make the yellows a bit oranger to showcase the sunlight. Green's there. Aqua's up. Blues. I don't want the blues to be too magenta, so I'm actually going to keep them right where they are. Purples, not affecting much, just kind of the background. Looks like, what is that, Import Guys logo? Import Guys logo. Sell me a car for cheap, please. Alright, magentas. It's really only affecting just one little logo on a shirt. Alright. Get rid of a little bit of the blue, but in this case we have, Rucheski's car is really, and then Daniel's car, I don't know why I'm saying their last names, has the blue livery. So if I get rid of too much of it, you lose a lot of the color in the vehicles. But if I don't get rid of it, you keep pretty blue smokes. So again, one of those things you kind of have to deal with on your own later. I'm going to get rid of some of it here, and then during the masking, we're going to bring some blues back. Get rid of the greens. I don't really need the photographer back there. Who is this, by the way? Let's find out. Can we find out from here? I can't tell. I don't know. If you're watching, I'm so sorry. Alright. Yeah, I'll get the reds up a little bit, and the oranges up just a little bit too, I think. Zoom out a little so I know what I'm doing. It's not too bad. Green's down, aqua's down, blue's down. Actually, blue's up maybe? Blue's up a little. Okay, and then we're gonna go into color grading, and then we get to mask out some stuff. And we will be done for the night. I think I do like it oranger here. It does give off kind of the vibe that like the sun is really beating down on the vehicles, even though I made it a little bluer in the curves. I think that orange helps out. Midtones, what are we looking at? Be real easy to go too overboard on this one. I think we're gonna leave midtones as they are. Then highlights. Maybe we'll do more orange highlights, and then shadows will bring a little bluer. Yeah, we do that? Okay, I think that looks pretty good. It kind of brings some of the color out of the smoke. Makes it look like there's a bit of sunlight. Okay. Perfect. And then we're gonna do the ambient masking first. I'm bringing up a radial gradient, and then I think I took it off. I did. Okay, so I will actually go through and show you guys how to do this. So I am kind of making a fake sun here. Bringing the radial gradient in, we're making it humongous. Absolutely ginormous. And this is going to kind of act as a sun ray. It's not going to be like, you know, you won't see specific sun rays, but I am just going to simply brighten things up from here. So exposure will be high. One thing you'll notice about when you point your camera at the sun, and this is just, you know, normal camera 101, right? You point your camera at a really bright object or the sun or something, you lose all your contrast. That's why lens hoods exist, to cut out that ambient light coming in from the sides, so you keep the contrast there. So if you're trying to make a sun ray, you drop all the contrast in that area, and it will give off that vibe of a sun ray. Lights, highlights, shadows up. We're going to do clarity down just a little bit, not too much. Dehaze, though, is going to be kind of the big thing. Down a lot, texture, up a little bit to make up for that clarity. And then, in this case, it's going to be orange. And extra saturation. Perfect. Okay. So, before the mask, after the mask, just, you know, add a little bit of sun, right? Add a little bit of directional light. In this case, we're going to make it a little smaller. Add it. Yeah, I think that makes it more impactful there. I have to do this while zoomed way out, unfortunately, just by virtue of the fact that I'm manipulating something that's way up here. Otherwise, I would love to, you know, be closer into the image. I think we're going to leave it around there. I don't want to impact in the cars too much. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, drop it down the slider a little bit. Perfect. Then one thing you can do, if you want to, is you can do, oh, let's duplicate and invert, don't do that. You can duplicate it, and the copy, you can bring in much smaller, much smaller. Have it be a very specific, you know, like a ray. Maybe we'll put that here. And we'll duplicate it again. Whoops, where we go? There we go. And this one will go, you know, maybe right here. And these ones will be a little bit less impactful. And it just kind of gives off the vibe of a little bit of a more realistic ray. There are other ways to do that in Photoshop. You can have like sun rays and stuff like that, but that's kind of the easy way to do it. Now you will notice that our highlights are now, well, of course it doesn't show them, but these are outrageously blown up here. Like that's stupid. And that is just something you're going to kind of have to deal with at this point. I could go in and, you know, do that again, bring the whites down, but as you can tell, that just starts to look weird. So if you're going to do these crazy sun rays, these fake sun rays, you're going to kind of just have to deal with blown highlights. It's not completely unrealistic to what you would see if you were actually shooting into a sun ray like that. So I'm not super worried about it. We're going to do the dark ground again, but we're going to shape it from the other side. And I'm actually going to cut some of it away. You'll see in a minute here. So subtract from the subject. That does a pretty good job. And then I'm going to use another linear gradient as a subtraction. We're going to subtract it like that. So it's really kind of only in the corner there. Just a kind of a trick to help bring the eyes towards the vehicles. Keep them away from the outside. Yeah, not bad. Kind of a gradient almost to a certain extent. Or not a gradient, kind of like a vignette to a certain extent, but in our own just one corner as opposed to everything. And then one last thing, we're gonna select these objects. Let's hope it does it really well again like it did in the last one. Nice, perfect. And we're just brightening up the shadows a bit, a lot of it because John's car is black. Gotta get these Goon Squad guys' cars a different color, man. Just super black for images is so tough. And we're just saturating the blues. You know what? I'm gonna do this specifically for blues. Don't want to just saturate the whole thing. There we go. Saturating the blues. I'm gonna do the other blue as well on Rucheski's car. And we're gonna make the range really small so it doesn't hit John's quite as much. Still hitting John's, but not quite as much. And then, yeah, shadows are up. Do we need to go up in highlights? It looks like just a tiny bit. Exposure even? So, okay, this is gonna look weird at first. We're gonna do exposure up, but then we're gonna go contrast up and we're gonna do blacks down. And the reason for that is to just give it some punch. So, there you go. Those cars definitely stand out a little bit more than they did before, but it doesn't look like they're, you know, completely overexposed. And then we're gonna do that, you know, mid-density brush to bring the cars back to the world. Just make them look a little more like they're here. A little more along the bottom. I think I usually do a little more along the bottom just because the bottom is naturally a darker area, you know, it's shadowed by the vehicle. So it makes sense that there would be a lot less light there. Alright, oh, that looks too bad. I think I'm gonna do one change here. Make this mask bigger. Just have it feather in a little bit more. Nice. I think that looks pretty solid. Okay. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to head out. I have definitely some more images to edit. Let's see. More images. More images to edit, but we definitely got some done here, and I can actually get these over to Driftcon so they can post some of them. Hopefully they will enjoy that. Thank you guys for being here. Suggestions, anything, always very helpful. Definitely early to streaming, so I don't really know what I'm doing. I might try Twitch one of these times too, just to see kind of the differences and see what it feels like over there. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed. I had a lot of fun. I always have a lot of fun editing. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. See you.